now over Facebook, my personal Facebook page. We're going out live over my Facebook personal profile and the Look For page. And let's see if we're also going out live over Odyssey. Welcome. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Sam Bankman-Fried FTX scandal. Like, what the hell, guys? A massive, massive scandal. And we have some insight into it because about 6 months ago, I interviewed Rony Guldmann, who wrote the book, The Star Chamber of Stanford, on the secret trial of a Stanford Law fellow. And his two major antagonists were Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, Barbara Fried, and Joe Bankman.
Review too, where she saw essentially nothing of value in it. Just found it ponderous and repetitive and whatnot. So it goes back and forth. But assuming and likewise.
So he's talking here about his time at Stanford Law School.
As to the specific gaslighting contentions, I've had intelligent people who were readily persuaded of my claims. I've had intelligent people who are met intelligent people who are completely dismissive of my claims, and all sorts of people in between those. And so they're sort of, you go back and forth, am I crazy or am I not? Am I saying anything original or am I not? So I assume that experience is, some version of that experience is, pretty common for most artist types.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about some of the lead characters. And the number one character in the book, from my understanding, is Barbara Fried. So who is Barbara Fried?
Well, she was one of the two professors in one of the classes I took my last year at Stanford. And she clearly liked my work, and she was the one who offered the fellowship. So that's why, she is in a sense the main character, also because I have the most email communications from her. So, and this is something that I try to emphasize. I'm not attacking anyone personally. No, I'm not. They're all nice.
Okay, so Barbara Fried is the mother of Sam Bankman-Fried, and she published an op-ed back in 2013, right, where she shreds the philosophy of personal responsibility. So she argued in 2013, the philosophy of personal responsibility has ruined criminal justice and economic policy. All right, this is the mother of Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX. Right, she's a Stanford Law professor. She said it's time for Americans to ditch the philosophy of personal responsibility. So she was on the Democratic super PAC Mind the Gap. She was the board of directors chair. And she penned this 2013 essay published in Boston Review arguing it is time for Americans to ditch the philosophy of personal responsibility. It's time to move past blame, guys. Philosophy of personal responsibility has ruined criminal justice and economic policy. All right. She wants harm reduction policies such as rehabilitation instead of incarceration. She says public reactions to wrongdoing have been studied extensively. We need to listen to the peer-reviewed experts, and the more information people have about the context of a crime, the person who committed it, the circumstances that person came from, the more nuanced are their views of moral responsibility. So to know all essentially is to forgive all, to use that old French phrase. That we alter our judgments of blame as we acquire greater knowledge of the person and the context in which she acted should put to rest any thought that our blaming practices are naturally immutable or even recalcitrant. So she says that harm reduction policies are not to coddle criminals or deny their accountability. It is to reduce future harm at a tolerable cost to all of us, wrongdoers, including by influencing wrongdoers' future choices through rehabilitation or carefully calibrated deterrence and, when necessary, isolation from society. She says, we have got nothing from our 40-year blame fest except the guilty pleasure of reproaching others for acts that, but for the grace of God or luck or social or biological forces, we might well have committed ourselves. Interesting, she talks about the power of biological forces. It would be nice to have, a lot more people investigating the power of biological forces. So let me send an invite to Dooovid here.
Nice people who are committed to their chosen profession, no question of that. But I am critiquing the norms of that profession as they were embodied in these people. So so I sort of do seize upon her as kind of a paradigm case of certain academic pathologies. Not hard to do because you wouldn't be successful if you didn't have those pathologies to one degree or another. So I have certain.
You wouldn't be successful if you didn't have these pathologies, right? So some of these pathologies that might make for success, all right, okay, they also make for absolute disasters for society. And so Sam Bankman-Fried, he was awesome. Thank you, Luke. He was, a major player in philanthropy, and he was trying to do all these good works. Major donor to the Democratic Party, and he was clearly running a scam. Send an invite here to Dooovid, right? Do people who don't have these pathologies, are they as equally cut out for success? Because a large part of success usually is getting along with other people and speaking the language.
Critiques of her worldview, but I think on the other side, I also acknowledge certain of her virtues, namely that she kind of, from words that she said, said she has a certain prophetic prescience. I think she had an intuitive sense that this conflict was there, and Joe as well. They had a certain intuitive sense of this conflict. They thought it could be managed, and it couldn't be. But I think they.
So the Joe here is Joe Bankman. All right, that's the father of Sam Bankman-Fried. All right, so both Barbara and Joe are Stanford Law professors.
Notwithstanding how things turned out, I think that.
And they are the major antagonists in Ronny Guldmann's story at Stanford. And he wrote a memoir about it, The Star Chamber of Stanford, on the secret trial of a Stanford Law fellow.
Both she and Joe saw a certain potential in me, which a lot of others didn't, and I'm grateful for that. Though that potential could not unfold according to the rules which they had prescribed, and hence the conflict.
Now, how do you think, in a safe space, Barbara Fried would talk about her experience with you? How would she describe it?
Well, look, people move on with their lives. So, when, Josh Cohn responding, he had a good enough opinion of me, but I left no, lasting impression. That's perfectly fine with me because people move on with their lives, and there's absolutely no reason why they, this many years later, would really have, any strong feelings about me one way or the other. Maybe whether they'll have strong feelings about the publication of the book is something else. I don't know, but yeah, I wouldn't expect her or anyone else. I would expect me to be very important to them, to any of them, because they have the right to move on with their lives. But of course, I have the right not to move on with my life. Also, which describes why I have been clinging to this experience and seeking to articulate it for so many years.
Yeah. So was Ronny Guldmann ahead of the curve? Was he warning us about something that we should be aware of? This is Anthony Scaramucci here.
Skybridge Capital founder, a CNBC contributor, and somebody who had sold part of his business to Sam Bankman-Fried. Anthony, it's great to see you, sir.
Well, I would say it's good to be here, but it's a concerning day, Andrew, and there's a lot of distress in the markets, and a lot of my friends think it's the worst week in cryptocurrency history.
Well, let's talk about that, and let's talk about the ramifications of it. But first, on a very personal basis, you spent some time with Sam recently. What happened?
So this is from 10 days ago.
Well, listen, I spent a lot of time with him, actually. We traveled to the Middle East. This is before these revelations were exposed. We were embarking upon helping him fundraise. He had purchased 30% of my business, and so as good citizens, we were trying to help him around the world. When the crisis hit over the weekend, I made a unilateral decision to fly down to the Bahamas on Tuesday in the spirit of helping. And so you caught what Brian was saying there. The original idea was this is a rescue finance situation, and could we somehow help, which would obviously help the entire industry. And then when I got to the Bahamas, it became clear, at least from some of the people that worked on the legal team and the compliance team, that perhaps there was more going on than it being a rescue situation. So when I left the Bahamas in the afternoon, I was actually distressed. I don't want to call it fraud at this moment because that's actually a legal term, and none of us know, and we have to leave it up to the regulators, and we also have to give everybody a presumption of innocence. But I have to tell you, I'm distressed about it. I don't like it for the industry, and I would implore Sam and his family. He has two wonderful parents, Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried. I would implore them to tell the truth to their investors, get to the bottom of it, stop 22 tweets, but get themselves in front of a regulator and explain exactly what happened. And if there was fraud, let's clean it up to the extent possible and repair the accounts at FTX. For myself, I'll be working on buying back my equity. and restoring that. The good news for Skybridge investors, we had no assets on custody there. We thought that was a potential conflict of interest, and so we were saved that way. But the bad news is, and I'll say this very candidly to everybody, I liked and trusted Sam.
And Dooovid, what's going on, Dooovid? Okay, Dooovid, how you doing?
Hey, Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. So, what's new? What's new by you?
Nothing much. Was just listening books on my eBay.
And have you paid any attention to this Sam Bankman-Fried FTX meltdown and Ronny Guldmann? Right, he wrote a memoir about dealing with Sam Bankman-Fried's parents.
I didn't put that together till you just mentioned it. Yeah, Sam Bankman, FTX is probably the main story that I'm following right now. Since it came out, I've been reading basically everything I could find on it. You're watching videos. Maybe I even have my own theories on it.
Okay, so what are you thinking?
Well, there's the conspiracy theories, because obviously we don't know that much information, and I didn't put together, the Rony Guldmann connection because I didn't read that book of his. Although I did look, watch your video, but I didn't put it together that was his parents. Yeah, I mean, my prediction is that there's a pretty large conspiracy going on, and he's probably just going to be the fall guy without us figuring out too much information. There's also the Ellison-Gensler connection, and the involvement of his parents is hard to tell whether it was set up as a scam the whole time, whether they're getting kickbacks from the Democratic Party, whether his father helped them out. I know he provided some of his legal advice, some of his original connections. So I'd say it's more speculation because there's not much facts that we could pull out of it, but certainly ripe for conspiracy theories.
Now, you've been following it. What drew your attention to this story?
I never invested in crypto. I follow crypto a little bit, and God forbid, I think it's just going to be the major story. I think that there's probably a lot of people involved, and it's interesting because you keep on wanting to check back the news and see if there's going to be more information. I think probably over 1 million people are going to lose significant amounts of money, and God forbid, it probably also the majority of the people involved are probably also Jewish.
And you said Ronny Guldmann's going to come on your show, or who's talking to Ronny Guldmann?
I was asking you, when you were first doing it, I thought maybe you were going to bring him on and he was going to give some special insight. Is that the same law school that has the Palestinian protests where they supposedly you aren't allowing Jews to speak or Zionists to speak at clubs, or it's a different law school?
I'm not sure.
Did you hear those national? I mean, that made the national news over and over again. It was probably overdone by anti-Semitism watchdogs, but saying a Jew-free space, whereas really just a few student clubs that made an agreement not to invite pro-Israel speakers. But and I know it's probably a hotbed for anti-Zionism. At the same time, a huge overrepresentation of Jews. I mean, have you analyzed the Jewish angle? I mean, certainly none of these people are Orthodox. A handful of his partners may be non-Jews, but it appears, God forbid, most of the names involved are Jews. Like Gensler, Ellison's, her father, the MIT professor, the Berkeley, the Democrat fundraising arm. It's funny. I was just showing a week in review. The New York Times still hasn't taken down November 30th, their big annual conference that has Netanyahu, Zuckerberg, Janet Yellen, Zelensky, and Sam Bankman-Fried. So if you check the New York Times for their advertisement for that event, they haven't removed Bankman-Fried.
Well, obviously, the more you have in common with people, the better you're likely to get along. So it makes sense that there are Jewish affinity networks. Also, if you speak in a similar sense, all right, there's a way that elites speak, there's a way that people who go to elite universities speak. And so if you have that education in how to speak like a member of the upper class with the right, social, political values, you're going to do much better as you try to navigate your way through the rich and powerful. So affinity networks and cultural ties and similar worldviews and similar vocabulary, similar ways of speaking, all these things that kind of bind people together and make people comfortable with each other. It makes sense that those who have that, say, elite university education and maybe have that secular Jewish identity, secular liberal Jewish identity in common, more likely to do business together.
Yeah, probably an optimism, even though they're probably atheistic circles, that and a lot of times I'll use this argument against atheists of this hope that the good guys are going to win, their perspective of what a good guy is, even from the perspective that you've talked about hero, what'd you call it? The
hero systems.
Yeah, hero systems, where Jews would be gullible to think that Bankman-Fried might be the hero that fits their hero system. So it's like, oh, this Jewish guy is, just so smart that he's making all this money, and he's, basically a good guy. He doesn't really need all that money, and he's going to give the money to the right systems. And even though, not like an Orthodox view of who succeeds and them being rewarded by God, but some sort of hero system where Bankman-Fried was the hero that they were looking for, and the hero that they could believe somehow was going to beat the system, and then send a lifeline out and donate to their charity and their causes, and support the Democrats and all these various institutes.
What do you think about the idea that makes sense to me that we all need a hero system? We all need some way of transcending our own insignificance by attaching ourselves to something transcendent, whether it's science, the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of beauty, the pursuit of God, that having a hero system is essentially a biological necessity.
I mean, if you're going to say it's a biological necessity, you would require biological evidence. So, as opposed to psychological or philosophical, some sort of like genetic or neurological wiring. And then if you took an atheistic view, you say like, no, hero systems are false and it's a remnant of belief systems. So if you're an atheist, there are no heroes. Like Benjamin Franklin, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, I would tend to agree with you, but I'm not sure I would make it a biological argument. Might make it a spiritual argument. And then if you did have atheistic leanings, that you would probably want to root out your tendency to believe in heroes, and even a Judaic view of the Yetzer Hora, Yetzer Tov. All people are fallible. All people make mistakes. There's no such things as hero. It's just a human weakness to want to believe in them.
Right. So the idea of hero systems comes from Ernest Becker and his classic work, The Denial of Death. So he says the way that we go about denying death is by striving for the heroic, that we take part in activities which lead us to believe that we're something more than just our physical body, that we're participating in something that will go on past our physical death and therefore grant us a form of immortality. So artists and writers feel like they can achieve this type of immortality through the creation of great work that they hope will affect people long after their death. But what about the great masses of people, the mediocre, who are incapable of personally achieving the heroic like an artist? How are they able to fulfill their urge to heroism? And so Ernest Becker says society acts as the vehicle in which the vast majority of people act out their urge for heroism. So in our culture, especially in modern times, the heroic may seem too big for us or we too small for it. Tell a young man that he is entitled to be a hero and he will blush. So we disguise our struggle for the heroic by piling up figures in a bank account or reflecting privately on our heroic sense of worth, or by having a better home than our friend or our neighbor, a bigger car, brighter children. But underneath all these strivings for the heroic throbs the ache of cosmic specialness, no matter how we mask it in concerns of smaller scope, so that we deny death by becoming fully absorbed in our social role, whether it's as a sportsman, as a do-gooder, as a comic, as a hard worker, as a family man. So we strive for whatever one's group deems most desirable. So this will frequently be money, fame, status, right? And so society is a hero system. Society is a living myth about the significance of human life. It is a defiant creation of meaning. Any thoughts on that description of a hero system?
I generally agree with it. And, it's been insightful. Like I'd mentioned the Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Ironically, Taylor Swift, I've also been following that story, where her most popular song in the world now is called Anti-Hero. But I think I would generally dispute that like heroes are for the weak, heroes are a fallacy. So it's true that we seek out heroes. There's the natural motive. Heroes fill that social and psychological function, but in essence, they're a fallacy. And I might even relate it as a derivative to the question of evil and what I would call karma, the Hindu term, but the Judaic conception of Maimonides' 13 principles. We reviewed in Mark Shapiro, that the righteous get rewarded and the wicked get punished. So you see like a hero as the righteous person who gets rewarded, but from a non-theistic point of view, there's no reason to assume that the righteous get rewarded and the wicked get punished. And people have a natural tendency, I think, to be skeptical, especially about success and wealth and heroes. Think like Taylor Swift, or for some example like that. Is she the example of the righteous being rewarded? And people are like, oh, probably not. That but so why is she the most famous person in the world right now? Does it have anything to do with righteousness? So that natural tendency to believe that there's a connection between doing good things and being rewarded and doing bad things and being punished leads into this creation of heroes, like what's the name of the author you said you were reading from again?
Ernest Becker.
Yeah, Ernest Becker. So, I mean, he lays it out pretty well. I'm not sure if you agree with me that you're saying it's essentially a fallacy to related to the belief that the righteous get rewarded and the wicked get punished.
Right. Well, the hero system in Ernest Becker's thought is not so much about having heroes, it's finding a way to be heroic yourself. So some people will get their sense of the heroic from taking care of their family. Other people will get the sense of heroic by volunteering. Other people will get the sense of heroic from the work that they do. Other people get a sense of heroic from being a part of a religion or being part of a particular people. And I don't think it's necessary to believe that the righteous are rewarded and the evil are punished, but it certainly helps, right?
So Becker divorces it from fame and excessive achievement. That, I mean, typically people look at think of heroes as people who have excessively achieved. So like Sam Bankman-Fried obviously gave more charity than almost anybody else because he had the means to do it, to be a hero like that. But he just talked like your everyday hero, and to normalize the hero, which is sensical and makes sense. But at the same time, Becker is killing the hero idea by saying that anyone could be a hero.
Well, everyone needs to feel like a hero. That's what he's saying. And so I mean, there are shows that I do, and afterwards I feel heroic, or even during them, I feel heroic. I get a considerable amount of my meaning and purpose from doing live streams. I'm sure you've been very satisfied with some of your live streams, and felt heroic that you said something that was unique. I mean, you often say things that I've never heard anywhere else. So I'm sure that you, like me, get some of your sense of self and some of your sense of purpose and mission, and doing something good in life from your participation in live streams. Is that fair?
Yeah, but then you're getting more back towards my hero conception as opposed to Becker, where it's dependent upon exceptional achievement, where presumably you feel better about your live streaming when you have success, and the type success that makes you special, as opposed to the average person who doesn't have the reach of thousands of people, that's not a published author, that never could have fathomed doing the things that you did, so to say, as opposed to you're saying if nobody tuned in, you're just talking to a handful of people, would that still be a hero system, like in the Becker sense?
Yeah, it would be. Like, I don't know if I've done live streams that very few people watched, so maybe only 80 people ever watched them, but I thought they were good. That I am pleased with the things that I said on that live stream, and so I do feel a sense of heroism that I said something important, whether or not the world recognizes it right now. I did something heroic. Now, it's easier to feel heroic if you're doing a live stream where 3,000 people are watching live, 1,000 people, or 500 people. But if you do good work, if you write a good essay, and nobody else acknowledges it, but you enjoy reading it, then I still think it's very, very easy to feel a sense of the heroic. So I'll often read something that I've written on my blog, and even if nobody else tells me it's good, if I laugh when I read it, if I look at it in a new browser and go through and read what I've written, and I think, oh yeah, that's strong, that makes sense, these are good points, then I get a sense of the heroic. And I'm probably vastly exaggerating the importance and the heroism of what I'm doing, but that kind of serves us. It gives us a sense of confidence, and it gives us a sense of the heroic, even though it's vastly out of touch with reality. So as long as we don't get drunk on it, as long as we don't abuse other people on it, as long as we don't become antisocial or wreck our lives over it because we have this overly intoxicated view of the importance of what we're saying on a live stream, having an exaggerated sense of the importance of what you do on a live stream with very few viewers, I still think it gives one a sense of the heroic.
I get with Church of Entropy on Week in Review, we always get into these circular arguments about the meaning of words. And I mentioned, my grandfather's grandfather, who was a rabbi, was a philologist in Germany, the field of word study, and I like doing etymology. But it seems that Becker is destroying the historical meaning of hero, which means spectacular achievement, even demigod, where a hero is someone who displays godlike qualities, where a person would think that maybe this person isn't a mere mortal, but is a demigod. And so I appreciate the postmodernism, and I don't know if Becker's in the school of postmodernism, but I'm not I could understand egalitarianism, and I probably am largely an egalitarian, but I like the classic meaning of hero, and so I don't like the way Becker's doing. I think it's it's like IQ, not like if everyone could be a genius, genius doesn't mean anything. If anyone could be a hero, hero doesn't mean anything. Hero demands spectacular achievement, so much so that people be like, well, I'm just a mere mortal, I could never do that. That person must be a god. And what drives me is, like, I'm not denigrating what you said, and I agree with you. You could find meaning and have achievement in my rabbi said, small things make big people. But I assume like, okay, maybe you're a few years older than me, but even in my middle age, I still want to achieve spectacular things, and I want the classical definition of a hero, where I'm not just going to be a hero from finding hero-ness in my banality, but I'm actually going to achieve spectacular things that other people won't be able to achieve or even fathom how it was achievable by a mere mortal.
Right, but think about people with a 100 IQ, or God forbid, lower than a 100 IQ. Think about how many of them get their primary sense of meaning in life from being a sports fan. That they vicariously feel that they're heroic because their team wins a game, or their politician wins a game. So I don't know if you've known any intense sports fans. It, generally speaking, seems to be the more intense the sports fan, the more empty their life. And so I just remember a stage in my life when nothing was going right except the Dallas Cowboys were winning, my favorite football team. And that kind of got me through about 4 months because the rest of my life was in absolute shambles. So I don't know if you've had that experience, but I notice in real life, the more intense person's fandom, like the more emotionally elevated or destroyed they are by the performance of their team, the more empty the person's life.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel detached, so I never felt connected to, certainly a sports team or possibly like Judaism, Hasidism. More involved with like Chabad. It's like, oh, Chabad is winning, or Judaism is winning, Israel is winning. Even that, I've always felt largely detached, and not like other people's wins are my wins. And I put it like, I think I found out when I was small that that's really just a fallacy, that it doesn't benefit you. It's a false sense of something. You say, okay, yeah, people need to cling on to something. They need meaning, and they could find meaning by group identity, by attaching themselves to a larger purpose. And then when that purpose wins, kind of like Judaism in general, where most Jews like a loss for the Jews is painful to us, like like any act of anti-Semitism or vandalism or anything. It's just like, oh no, like I'm personally hurt. But at the same time, when Jews win, it's it makes us feel good. But I think that's a fallacy and a weakness, and so I could appreciate like people need the weakness, they need the crutch, but in essence, that's all it is. And saying like the John Lennon working class hero, like if you want to be a hero, then just follow me, and that's kind of an anti-hero song. But saying like, no, I want to be a hero. In order to achieve herodom, um, I'll take mentorship, I'll apprentice under heroes, but I'm not going to have the fallacy of sharing the glory with someone else, when the reality is like there's really nothing to share. There's no benefit to me. It's I'll say it's largely all fake.
So
You're not disregarding the psychological importance to it.
I was walking on Bondi Beach the other day wearing a yarmulke, and this couple came up and said Shalom Aleichem. They were from Oak Park. They were Frum Jews from Oak Park,
Michigan.
Yeah, Oak Park, Michigan. So I think that's relatively near you.
Yeah, even the Young Israel near my house, there was a couple that moved from Australia a few years ago. It's only the one I could think of, but there might be some interplay, and there's thousands of Orthodox Jews in Oak Park. Said that even in the Young Israel near my house, there's a couple that moved from Australia.
Now, do you consciously give yourself an exaggerated sense of heroism just to feel better, to feel stronger, to feel more confident? And do you simultaneously know that you're fooling yourself? So I do. Like, I give myself an exaggerated sense of heroism when I'm doing a live stream. I usually impute more importance to what I'm doing than is really there, because that gives me more energy, more excitement, more confidence in what I'm doing. At the same time, a part of me is kind of standing back and realizing, yeah, I'm giving this an exaggerated sense of importance. So do you consciously give yourself exaggerated senses of importance when you're performing in a live stream or writing a blog post, or are you always detached?
Yeah, I'm pretty much always detached, and I could be somewhat objective about the level of achievement. Um, and maybe like in chess or something, because I put a level where, yeah, I reached expertise, or I was playing big tournaments and I was the winner. Hundreds of people played, and I came out on top, or even having high ranking on the scoreboard. Uh, but to put it in perspective, like it didn't make me a hero. Possibility of mental gifts, or just that's what I worked on. Um, like in Perky Elvos, if you put the work in, you get the result. Uh, and then somewhat being objective, saying like, okay, Adam Green called me up. I was on his show this week. I had Forex Shark to talk about, FTX on Week in Review, got the most views, almost 3,000 views. We had over 200 viewers, highest view Church of Entropy ever had. From our usual like 10 to 20. And, I hadn't been on a big stream. So, Adam Green wanted to review the Ari Shafir Jew comedy. And you had like 300 viewers. But I would say I'm pretty objective about it. Even, the times where I've had success or failure, just to say, well, I'm a man of numbers and science, and say, there's a theory of expertise, there's human achievement, that I might be on the far end of the bell curve for certain matters of human achievement. And I think I'd mentioned, God forbid, Rabbi Balkany, the brother-in-law of uh, Ravashkin, who went to prison, and he had went to prison, and he had probably been the most famous rabbi in America for a period of time. He almost was made the rabbinic chaplain of the whole Senate. He had a weekly appointment with George Bush for years. Go on, but you said that one moment of honor, of pride, could be your downfall, and God forbid he had a downfall, went to prison, and God forbid, probably pretty much a broken man with not and so I always recognize that glory is fleeting, and to be detached from it and have some sort of objective assessment. Like, you're there in Hollywood, like, so even if you've got hundreds of streamers, you're a published author, that you could objectively look at your level of achievement, place yourself on the bell curve, compare yourself to people that have achieved far more than you, and then even you accurately assess, okay, in this realm, maybe you've achieved into the 99th percentile. So maybe you've had some luck, or maybe that's just in relation to the work that you put into it, and remain detached and objective about it.
Hmm. And have you rejoined the Jewish community, or are you still isolated from it?
Yeah, I haven't started going back to synagogue yet. I'm not sure. Like I probably should just pop in, start going Shabbos morning again, but I haven't done it yet. I started coaching chess. They called me at the Detroit Institute of Art, in Detroit. He asked me to help out again, so I've been coaching at a local high school. Um, like, God forbid, 2.5 miles from my house, there's not a single white in the whole high school. The percentage is some 90-some% black. Maybe, I'm not sure what the non-black is, but 0% white. But yeah, I feel pretty confident about my chess, so I went in there and been coaching their chess team, and then going to the Detroit Institute of Arts and coaching chess again, almost all African American. God forbid, the downtown synagogue, the rabbi came out with, kind of like Michigan had the ballot proposal for abortion, and came out like, like, as a Jew, as a rabbi, it's very important to protect the right to choose. And, they've taken a pretty hard turn to the left, so I'm not sure if I'll, if I'll go there again. They don't even have regular services, so I don't even know what to go there for. But yeah, I keep on meaning to start going Shabbos morning to my local Young Israel, but I still haven't brought myself to do it yet.
Is that synagogue you're talking about that came out for the right to abortion, is that an Orthodox synagogue?
No, that's the Detroit, downtown liberal synagogue. I mean, I tried to make an Orthodox minyan, and then it got taken over by, the elective process to a reform progressive synagogue, and they hired a female rabbi, and I still continued to work with them, and then they raised millions of dollars to raise a building. But that's the Young Israel is the only synagogue within walking distance from my house.
And you've trimmed your beard.
Yeah, well, I actually burnt my beard, using the Rebbe Nachman method, like the Kabbalistic fear that cutting your beard with a razor is like spiritually damaging. So I did the burning method. I think we discussed that before, but yeah, I just trimmed it a few days ago.
Tell me, refresh me. What do you mean? It's like a powder that you put on that burns away the beard?
No, I actually just use like a lighter or a match, and like I'll dampen my beard a tiny bit, so I don't burn myself. But you kind of just go around the beard with a with a match, and it burns right off. It has a certain smell, like the carotene smell in the hair, and the hair has a very distinct smell, but um, it's semi-common among Hasidim. Like Rebbe Nachman, that like I'm kind of scared, even though like I mean, I even admit, like, God forbid, I'll sometimes like use electricity on Shabbos or various things, but like I'm scared to trim my beard. So whatever reason, like I'm scared to trim my beard, or so I'm still burning it.
And why did you burn your beard? I mean, why did you feel the desire to trim it, to remove most of it?
I probably spent 8 years of my life where I didn't shave once. Like I'd hardly shaved, just a handful of times. I was very late and had small hair growth, even till about 20 years old. So I never even really shaved much, and I was a Hasidic Jew, and the first time I decided to do it, like I was superstitious. I was scared to cut my beard because I was like, into the Hasidus and the Kabbalistic warnings. So I burnt my beard, because I still wanted to be a Hasidic Jew, but it was getting kind of longer than I wanted. Even my late 20s, I got a handful of white hairs. Now, God forbid, I have a bunch of them, but um, so for probably like 5 years, I started burning my beard while I was a Hasidic Jew, because it was like the exception. Because like you're definitely not allowed to cut your beard, especially in like the very Hasidic circles I was in Brooklyn. So I burnt my beard, and so I've just been using that method since. Even though, yeah, I think I'm still superstitious for whatever reason. That I just like we were talking the hero system. I'm a rationalist, but I'm superstitious about some things, and I've read the Kabbalistic material about the negative spiritual impact of cutting your beard, and the one exception of burning it, even though that's even just a weak exception.
Okay, back to the Sam Bankman-Fried FTX meltdown. Are there any perspectives, any articles you've read, any podcasts you've heard, any ideas that have been shared that have most captured your attention in this story?
Yeah, I've checked news sources of all kind, and so there's a few, like, I think Coinbase or crypto pages, and I spoke to this guy Forex Shark, who um, I became friendly with. He saw me on JF Public Space debating years ago, and he's a trader, and we've been talking for years. Um, so there's actually trading periodicals, and then there's the liberal media. So I've noticed the New York Times. Um, I've been reading the New York Times for a few years now. Like, my mother's got the New York Times for her whole life. Oh, they don't do a hard copy anymore, so just online. She gave me a password. But yeah, I noticed the New York Times has been very sympathetic towards him. The New York Times was propping him up, even kind of putting him as this hero and the future of trading. A lot of the mainstream liberal media. I read the Vox article. Vox admitted that they were funded by him, and they had the Twitter leaks. But I'll just search it and read all types of information, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, kind of like the alt right or any subfield. There's a lot of people into crypto, and so there's a lot of crypto web pages and news servers that have regular stories. I've checked YouTube also, so a lot of names I never even heard of. I think there's a guy, Peter Boyle, that does financial stuff. I saw Sam Harris, who had interviewed him, and his retake. But just searching YouTube for videos on it, so there's the hardcore conspiracies, there's the mild conspiracies, and then there's like the evidentiary conspiracies that are kind of digging through what we know, and you're not trying to label a conspiracy, but just saying something's up here. What can we gather from the information? Saying like, is like Bankman-Fried's father, how much is he involved? Did he know about it? We know that Bankman got a lot of his connections from his father. How we got into the hero system thing in general. Were they just suckers falling for their desire for there to be this hero that was going to make all this money and then be just with it and give it to the right causes? Or was there some sort of active conspiracy? There's a lot of random YouTube videos making connections to Ukraine. There's some evidence, like certainly he raised money for the Ukraine, at least $70 million. If he got cuts on it, the New York Times, he was going to be speaking there with Zelensky. And then there's also the internal crypto, like Binance. I'm not sure if you know the CZ, the Canadian Chinese competitor of Binance, who took him down. So I watched his interviews, and I've read the articles about him. If to say, was it some sort of CIA, U.S. government, who knows, would be involved in the conspiracy to try to take down Bitcoin, and there's all sorts of Bitcoin is being used to skirt sanctions, possibly by North Korea, Iran, Russia. Binance has refused to conduct sanctions against Iran and Russia, and so there's credible motive that Bankman could just be the fall guy for U.S. government activity, trying to steer people away from Bitcoin, or FTX's main competitor, Binance. I'm not sure how much you've read into the story or know the players, if you're familiar with Binance and CZ, or what he was doing for raising money for Ukraine, or the the general fear of Bitcoin and being used to skirt sanctions in like Iran and Russia.
Well, I turned pretty hard against Bitcoin about a year or 2 years ago, and so I haven't read much about cyber currencies since then. So in May of 2021, that's when I just thought that these cyber currencies were useless, and so I haven't kept up with them.
Useless to you, maybe.
No, useless in general. I think that in May of 2021, I just don't see any benefit from using cyber currencies unless you're a criminal.
Yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it also, because like I had heard of Bitcoin even from the very beginning, and it didn't seem to have any use besides for as
one
an
of the most
investment,
dangerous things.
Some way to make a bunch of money, and I don't know what I would want to buy with it. And I don't have enough money that I would consider diversifying and investing in Bitcoin. But I think for the criminal activity, certainly on the alt right, did you ever make a Bitcoin for yourself to collect donations?
No, I did buy $500 worth of Bitcoin at one point, and made some money with it, but
you never set up like a
no, the Bitcoin
uh,
wallet.
yeah. So I mean, certainly on the alt right, stayed alive. Like Nicholas Fuentes had that large donation. John Francisco Repi, even from what I understand, that's how the Daily Show, Mike Enoch and Eric Stryker made a whole bunch of money and were able to stay afloat on Bitcoin. But also, like God forbid, the JCC, the Israeli JCC bomb hoaxer, used Bitcoin, and that's why he was so hard to detect for a period of time. And the likelihood that North Korea and so I was always skeptical, and I always figured that it's probably it's probably the major players are like North Korea and Iran, and in the news stories like Russia. Um, but it's an important story. And so if you're the CIA or the US government and you're worried about sanctions on these countries or global geopolitics war, that Bitcoin's probably what they're using, and that's theoretically why the powers that be in the US were likely propping up Bankman-Fried, and then he was just stealing the money or gambling away with it, that it was borderline ridiculous. And I've mentioned that in science and engineering in general, that most people in politics know extremely little about science and engineering. Like I think we talked about the few times over the years of the congressional hearings on social media, and they might talk about censorship, but when they talk about how the technology actually works, God forbid that the boomers, even my parents, are really far behind, and I could see like that it's possible. I mean, how do you see it, uh, how did I could see millions of people getting fooled if they're just young people thinking it's going to be easy time to invest or cheat on taxes or to not have a digital footprint. But also majority criminal activity, and then just people saying, well, at the same time, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of it, and I want to get in on it. And just so the major driving mark of the market is fear and greed, and so it was probably just greed where people like you, um, were like, okay, who cares? I didn't care. But at the same time, if you're investing and you see other people making money, the greed factor gets in, and it's like, oh, there's easy money. Everyone else is making easy money, and so at some point you try to get in on it, and then God forbid, someone like Bankman-Fried stole all your money and it's all gone.
Right. So when I finally did some research on cyber currencies in May of 2021, I just thought these are not good investments, and most importantly, they're terrible forms of currency. So there are 5 features that a currency should have. This was a blogger, Kevin Drum. It should be hard to counterfeit. It should be stable in value. It should be easy to carry. It should be widely accepted. It should be 100% liquid. Bitcoin fails 3 of these tests. It's not stable in value. It's not widely accepted. It's not 100% liquid. It's just I just didn't see the benefit for Bitcoin unless you're operating in the black market. And so
You didn't have that drive for easy money, even though you didn't see the benefit, and just saying like, oh my God, all these people are making so much easy money.
I did. I dropped $500 when I earned 15% on that $500 I just got out.
You said 1,500%?
No. I invested $500. I earned 15%. I made like $75, and then I just got out.
Yeah, I mean that's people like want to make 1,500%, and double their money. So returns that aren't possible in normal markets. And yeah, I thought that was pretty shady, and likely that people would lose their money. Although I don't think they're going away, due to global shadiness. And you see people like Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey, a lot of billionaires are pro crypto, And I could see that also, that if you had extremely large amounts of money, that you might want to diversify, and you might want some of that in crypto. And it's probably shady in general if it's a distrust in the dollar or the U.S. government. So if it's like me and you, would just be like, okay, God forbid if the U.S. collapses, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not preparing for that scenario with like Bitcoin. But if you were extremely wealthy and you were worried about like post-apocalypse or like who knows, like the country turning on you, um, that Bitcoin also serves that purpose. But you would have to be able to use it somewhere, and that would probably mean like like you're gonna. I mean, you can't even use it in China. Saying that you're gonna travel someplace else in the world and try to make a new start with like. So I don't have that kind of doomsday planning. I don't. I doubt you're that type personality where it's like you're thinking like, oh my God, look what's happening here in the United States, and so I'm looking into like moving to South America and making a new start or something like that, where you would think about Bitcoin like that. But that's like also that's also pretty shady.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on. Any final words for today?
Yeah, nice to see. I've watched a few of your videos, and yeah, I'm not sure your time frame or your streaming, but good to hear from you, and see what happens. You definitely coming back in January, or
Yes.
you're okay?
I'll be
So
back
God
in
bless.
January.
Enjoy. And any update and possibly my suggestion on using your time to work on a book?
I haven't made any progress in that direction.
It's tough to do. I've been trying to work on my writing, but like if you found some sort of narrative arc or idea that you probably could write an interesting book. And I don't know how financially successful it'd be. Even Judaism, streaming, alt-right, any of these things. If you especially because you have so many blog articles that you could probably piece together to be the precursor outline of a book. But I got your book, so if you did that, it'd be interesting. But I can't afford to drop you. So someone would probably have to drop you a few $1,000s to make it worth your while to really work on it. But if you did do that, I think that'd be kind of cool.
Okay, Dooovid, good to talk to you. Take care. Okay, thanks, Dooovid. This is me talking about Bitcoin and cyber currencies in May of 2021.
I've been aware of Bitcoin for approximately a decade, but I only got stuck into it this week, did some reading on it, and I emerge unimpressed by Bitcoin. So perhaps the easiest summary that makes common sense to me is by a liberal blogger named Kevin Drum, how baseball cards explain what a Bitcoin really is. So what is money tends to have these attributes. It's hard to counterfeit. So Bitcoin meets that need. It is stable in value. That's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is rocketing up and down in value. It is light and easy to carry. Bitcoin meets that. It is widely accepted. Bitcoin does not meet that, and it is 100% liquid. So Bitcoin currently gets close to that. So is Bitcoin money? No, not really. But it is hard to counterfeit, and it is easy to carry around. So what else shares these attributes of being hard to counterfeit and easy to carry around? So rare stamps and coins and tulips, baseball cards. So Bitcoin really has few of the attributes of money, but all of the attributes of a collectible. So think of it as like a 1952 Mickey Mantle card that's worth more than a 1951 Willie Mays. Both cards are more valuable than, say, a Tom Egan rookie card, which is sort of the Dogecoins of baseball cards. So Bitcoin fans like to insist that it's money, but that's a serious category mistake. It's a genre error. So to criticize Ben Shapiro for being a shallow thinker, you're making a genre error, because he's just a talk show host who just pumps out the most conservative opinions possible, even if he knows absolutely nothing about what he's talking about. But that's the genre that he works in, talk show host. He doesn't write thoughtful books. He just knocks off shallow books. So Bitcoin's supposedly strongest selling point, absolute privacy, is mostly a lie because almost all Bitcoin is traded through central exchanges that are regulated by national governments. You don't have to use a central exchange if you have the technical chops to trade it yourself, but that's a pain and it makes Bitcoin even less money-like than it already was. So don't think of Bitcoin as money. Think of it as like Beanie Babies or Pez dispensers or other collectibles. And after you make this mental adjustment, you're no longer confused about Bitcoin. It's a collectible. It's not a currency. It's a collectible that's got a lot of hype. Maybe it will stay valuable the way that rare stamps and coins have stayed valuable, or maybe like Beanie Babies, it won't. But whatever turns out to be the case, it means nothing profound about the future of money. Bitcoin is just another collectible that will go up and down at the whims of its fans. I thought that was an excellent little summary there on Bitcoin. Here is a debate between Anthony Popliano and Mike Green on
both
Bitcoin.
For coming and having this conversation on Real Vision Crypto. Anthony, of course, you've been on Real Vision multiple times, and you've hosted Rao on your podcast. Mike, you host Mike Green in Conversation series right here on Real Vision. This debate started on Twitter. We all love Twitter. It's a great place to blast out little squibs, but not always the best place to have a long-form conversation. You know, when I think about this, this is more than a debate between two individuals. This is two worldviews colliding, and that broader collision is just beginning to be felt around the world. I couldn't think of two better people to represent those worldviews here than you. Pomp, you're at the very vanguard of the digital assets investment movement at Morgan Creek Digital. Mike, what you do over at Logica Capital is some of the most sophisticated analysis of traditional capital markets anywhere. And we're very glad to have both of you here on Real Vision for this conversation today. Mike, since you started to make the case that kicked off this debate, why don't you go first and explain the basic framework? What is your view of Bitcoin and why?
Well, just first as background, right? The reason that I became more actively involved in the Bitcoin debate was kicked off by actually a Real Vision event, a Blacklist event in Dallas, Texas in October of 2020. I was fortunate to be there and have the opportunity to engage with a number of family offices that were almost uniformly making the observation that they were in the process of replacing gold in their portfolios or reallocating away from gold into Bitcoin. And interestingly, they all used the same terminology, that it was the superior asset. As I began to evaluate that condition and to think about that dynamic, it was important for me to really dig in a professional sense. And as I've indicated elsewhere, I've participated in Bitcoin. I've had involvement with Bitcoin on a personal basis historically. I ultimately have chosen not to do that anymore. And that was a personal choice. As I dug into it on a professional basis, it required a much deeper dive. Once I began to dig into it and to evaluate this claim that Bitcoin was a superior asset, it became very clear to me that that was really totally untrue, that it was an inferior asset relative to gold.
So I played around with Bitcoin. Number one, I wanted to make it easier. If people wanted to give me money in the form of Bitcoin, I wanted to learn a little bit about it. And I bought some Bitcoin. I held on to it till I made about a 15% profit. Then I sold all out of Bitcoin about 2 months ago.
Certainly in terms of the dynamics of why a central bank would choose to hold it. And secondly, it was recognizable as an inferior asset once you actually began to evaluate the claims that are made within the community. I think one of the things that sets my work apart in traditional asset markets is the recognition that a rising price does not tell you something is working, that something is going to be successful. Right? You and I have been recorded where I've used the terminology driving uphill with no brakes. I would suggest the same thing applies to Bitcoin, where the price has clearly risen, and that gives people comfort in the story. But the reality is that Bitcoin is a superior asset for one reason and one reason only. It facilitates those who want to work against the existing system, either to generate dollars in the case of China, Russia, Iran, or other bad actors on the global stage that are trying to avoid sanctions, or for criminal purposes. And as I dug further into the data that is presented within the industry, it became very clear that the data that is being presented is disingenuous. So for example, the industry will simultaneously say 95% of the data is fake, 95% of the transactions are fake, and then use those same 95% of the transactions in disputing the claim that crypto is primarily used for crime. If you look at reports like the report from Elliptical that came out in 2020 regarding the utilization of crypto for crime purposes, they suggest that it's around 2%. And the disingenuous claim is made over and over again that the US dollar is more widely used for crime, or the euro is more widely used for crime. Of course, that's true given the relative acceptance of them, but as a proportion of transactions within Bitcoin, we either have to decide that the 95% of the transactions that are referred to as being fake and therefore shouldn't be considered should be ignored when we're thinking about the dynamics of the utilization for crime purposes. And if we adjust for that, what we discover is nearly 40% of crypto transactions are actually used for crime.
So to just get one dramatic perspective on cyber currencies, there's a terrific series on Netflix called Startup. It runs 3 seasons. It was originally on Crackle, but it's all about the world of cyber currencies, about people starting up a cyber currency business and then starting up their own dark web. And set in Miami. It's great fun, and it's a dramatic way of getting a feel for the cyber currency world.
The vast majority of the mining activity is occurring in regions like China, Russia, and Iran. And if we incorporate the participation of mining pools, they control in excess of 90% of the hash rate. This is not a decentralized system. It has become an increasingly centralized system focused on one thing and one thing only, attracting US dollars and providing that to those who are utilizing resources in regions like China, Russia, and Iran to capture dollars.
Pomp, I imagine you have a different view.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can get into all the specifics of kind of my.
Okay, and so also in May of 2021.
Well, he was around a lot of Muslims. It was the Middle East, and as I've said to you before, authoritarians love authoritarianism.
Shapiro, will you bake Ruben a wedding cake? The answer is no.
The very implication that we exist to do things for the greater good is totally antithetical to the purpose of being human. Bolsonaro, no movement goes on forever, right? Eventually it either spins out of control in a horrific way or it perhaps winds down or something in the middle. If we were having an anniversary party, would you come?
Honestly, I'd have to think about it in the same way.
So that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
that's a different thing.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal. You're a great use.
Don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself. Competition would start kicking in. All I ever wanted was exact equality under the law. Now we're equal. You could call me a fad right now. It wouldn't mean anything to me. Between UPS and FedEx and Amazon and drones and blah, blah, blah and DHL, your brain's got a lot of stuff in there. 30 years from now, I may have moved you. I'm coming to an anniversary party.
It would be unlikely that you'd move me, but I can never rule out the possibility of being moved on anything.
I believe that probably at 80-something years old, Ben will go, I think maybe I was wrong on that.
So you have to confront them with these ethical dilemmas, and usually you'll watch their heads explode. Why is it that we're able to do this, and most people can't do this? That's what I'm curious about. All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Don't be a coward.
Hey, hello.
All right, welcome back, fam. How are your diamond hands going? Let's keep it strong, everybody. We just got to hold on a little bit stronger, and then we're going to the moon. I promise you guys, we're going to go to $1 million. And for your other friends and family, make sure to get them in on this right now. Also, borrow their money, take out the loan, take a loan on your car, mortgage your house, take out the loan on your bank. You can take out loans on your credit cards as well. Max out those credit lines. Ask your friends, your family, your parents to put everything into Bitcoins because this is your last chance. If they don't, they're going to have fun staying poor. Now, in this video, we are going to be pumping our next altcoin, which is Cardano, and why I think Cardano will 10x. So let's get those diamond gloves, put them on, and put it into Cardano, which is going to be the future of DeFi and overtake Ethereum as the #1 DeFi coin out there. Now, let's clarify something. I know that I'm the biggest crypto bear out there, but if you're to ask me which one coin I may invest in and which coin I think is going to 10x from here on out, then that may just well be Cardano. And I wanted to outline for you the bull case for why I think Cardano has a few legs to run on here. So if we take a look here actually at the top 8 coins, let's say, well, we've got Bitcoin #1.
Okay, this is some of my Bitcoin cynical production from May of 2021. Right, biggest story, who is Sam Bankman-Fried? Who are his parents?
But I think there's more, we can do more with her. Let's just focus on her because she's the paradigmatic, she's like the paradigmatic instigator and crusher of your dream.
Right.
Is that fair?
Sam Bankman-Fried's
mother, but I do describe things in that manner, but I also highlight the other story that I can understand. Like she, from her perspective, as the person who sort of went out on a limb to give me this fellowship and has certain professional aspirations. My conduct was highly delinquent. So I try to keep that tension in view. As you can tell from the book, there wasn't really, beyond a certain point, there wasn't really that much personal interaction other than through email. So
But she got you a fellowship. I would assume that's not a trivial get. She seemed to have substantial hopes and dreams for your career.
That's right, and I document that. Yeah, she did, and I frustrated those.
Yeah,
I agree.
You frustrated those, and so I would imagine that she experienced.
So he refused to abide by the customs, the norms, the ways of speaking that were expected of someone who wants to succeed in the legal profession, right? There's a special vocabulary for people in the ruling class, right? There are ways of speaking, there are ways of thinking, there are ways of discussing moral, political, cultural issues. And Rony Guldmann refused to abide, and he did not get to succeed. He did not get to elevate his career as his mentors, Bankman-Fried and Joe Bankman at Stanford Law School, expected of him. He refused to embody the elite discourse. He refused to embody the approach of the tenured faculty professor. He refused to play by the rules of the game. As a result, like, his career in the legal profession as a professor was absolutely crushed.
You as betraying her faith in you.
Yes, I believe that, and I use those very words. And is that true or is that not true? Well, that's where
it's subjective. Of course, from her perspective, I could understand why she would experience it as betrayal. But
okay, thank you, Glib Medley. This is Ronny Guldmann. He got a fellowship at Stanford Law School on the instigation of Barbara Fried, who is Sam Bankman-Fried's mother. Sam Bankman-Fried ran FTX into its meltdown. Billions of dollars are being lost. So Sam Bankman-Fried's parents are professors at Stanford Law School. They are also the antagonists in this Ronny Guldmann memoir on his 2 years at Stanford Law School. The memoir is called The Star Chamber of Stanford, on the secret trial of a Stanford Law Fellow. So Ronny Guldmann was initially the golden boy for Barbara Fried and her husband, Joe Bankman, who they are also the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX. And this is his story, his run-in, his refusal to abide by the norms expected of someone who's going to join the elite class.
Well, betrayal is a subjective feeling that other people aren't doing as you expected.
Yeah.
It's just a hyperbolic expression. Do you think she learned anything? Like, do you think she changed as a result of the great disappointment with Ronny Guldmann?
I really hesitate to speculate about something where I don't even have a modicum of circumstantial evidence. But with that caveat, again, I felt that there was a strong connection at certainly at the beginning. It wasn't just that she thought well of me, but I felt that she also had a sense of the potential for my project. That maybe she understood certain of its layers or felt certain of its layers even better than I had. So certainly, given that.
And what was his project? His project was a deconstruction of liberalism. And what he developed from that deconstruction is this epic work that I keep quoting from. It's Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression on the Nature and Origins of Conservaphobia by Ronny Guldmann. So that's Ronny Guldmann in the interview that I did with him in July of 2022. So this initially began as an essay he produced at Stanford Law School. Now it's been turned into a 700-page magnum opus, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression on the Nature and Origins of Conservaphobia. And this is a man largely of the left who is deconstructing leftism. And he gets down to the brass tacks. The main difference between the left-wing and right-wing approach to life is a different understanding of human nature. So the left-wing perspective is that we are buffered. So that what you do, what goes on outside of me doesn't necessarily have to affect me. That also other key parts of the left-wing view on the nature of the self is that we're basically good, that we have the capability of rationality and being strategic and autonomous. The right-wing understanding of the self is that we're not basically good, that we are porous, so that what you do, what goes on in the house next door is going to affect me. We're vulnerable, we're porous, right? And so because we're vulnerable and we're porous from a traditional perspective, the greatest danger is contagion and disorder, right? So people on the right tend to be alert for sources of contagion, moral, spiritual, biological contagion, as well as disorder. People on the left, they believe human nature is basically good, therefore the greatest dangers are ignorance and bigotry. So that's the foundation between these two different worldviews. And Ronny Guldmann does an excellent job of explicating this in his book, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression on the Nature and Origins of Conservaphobia. Right, this is Sam Bankman-Fried's father, Joe Bankman, appearing on the FTX podcast just
kids in general have like some aversion to doing things with their parents. I don't think this is always the case, but like, there's definitely some little natural resistance there. When you started helping FTX, like, did Sam ask you to come on, or did you realize, okay, like Sam needs a hand, I'm going to come on and help him? How did that initial interaction go?
Well, I don't know. I think we've always enjoyed working together and thinking together. At least I like to think so. So when I really came on was after Sam asking me for a number of years if I'd be interested in doing it, which was really gratifying. I think any parent would love to hear that. I wanted to make sure that I could do it and be useful. But I think from the start, whenever I was useful, I lent a hand. And it was clear at the start that on things like law, I mean, the company didn't have any lawyers. So I think my utility there was pretty obvious.
Yeah, totally. And what are some of the things, because now you've been, much more active member of FTX in the last maybe year and a half or something. What have you been up to? Like, what have your interests been?
Well, I spend about half my time working on charity projects. One that I'm working on, we call Bank the Unbanked. And as you probably know, Tristan, there are about, depending how you look at it.
Okay, so this is Sam Bankman-Fried's father, Joe Bankman, a professor at Stanford Law School. And this is an interview that was posted 3 months ago.
30 to 50 million Americans or more that don't have bank accounts or are underbanked. They have them, but they don't use them. And if you're not part of the financial system, everything is harder. It's expensive to cash checks. It's expensive to move money around. So that's kind of a national disgrace. Having a bank account's a little bit like having utilities. Everybody should have one. So what we're trying to do at FTX is figure out how to give populations that don't have bank accounts and crypto wallets. And so we had a pilot program in South Florida, and we have a big program coming up in Chicago. And the goal is to organize a template so that tens of millions of Americans can get a bank account that they can live with. And it's tougher if you're poor because you're living hand to mouth. So you're apt to overdraft your account, and then you face a big penalty. One of the advantages, by the way, of crypto is that the payment system is a lot faster. So moving from the bank settlement system to the blockchain could be one way we could limit that. Anyway, that's one of the things I spent a lot of time on. But actually, in my part of FTX charity, which is actually, I'd say only about a fifth of it, we have something like 240 activities going on right now or in the last year. So there's all sorts of programs. That's about half of what I do. And the other half of what I do is regulation, broadly speaking. So it's the bills moving through Congress. It's whether we'll get approval from a regulatory agency, things like that.
Do you work with Gabe, Sam's brother, as well with pandemic preparedness stuff, or not that much?
Whenever I'm asked, I do.
Okay.
And Gabe Bankman-Fried, Sam's brother, my son, is doing fantastic stuff on pandemic preparedness. And Sam and other principals at FTX, along with other people, are funding some of that. And as some of your viewers know or may know, it's kind of shocking that even after COVID, the one thing Congress has trouble funding is pandemic preparedness. And here's a pandemic that's killed way more people than died in 9/11 and cost trillions of dollars of damages. And yet it's easier to raise money to build a highway than it is to put money aside to deal with the next pandemic. So I do help Gabe a little bit with that. But mostly that's work that he and others are doing themselves. I just cheer it along.
Got it. And back to the bank then back. So essentially what they could end up with is something like an FTX app where they can receive their salary into if they're working a job, or they can have the FTX card where they can spend their balances from their crypto wallet. Is that sort of how it would work?
Exactly right. What we're doing is, like all FTX app users, you get a bank account with your app if you want it. So in Chicago, for example, we're working with justice impacted families. A lot of poor families, especially their people of color, have had family members spend time in prison. That's what we mean by justice impacted. And everything is harder once you get out. And almost none of these people have bank accounts. So what we're giving them is what we give all FTX US users, which is an app that is tied to a bank account, and it's tied to a debit card, an FTX card, basically a Visa card. We're funding that in this program, as we've always done with our pilot programs, with some money. And then individuals will have a bank account. They'll be able to deposit checks into that. And if they want to send remittances, which is a big deal for a lot of poor Americans, because they have even poor family members abroad in the global South. They want to send money abroad. It's a great way to send money abroad using stable coins. So we'll take this population and we'll show them how to use the app, and then we'll measure whether it improves their life.
Very cool. Yeah, I can totally relate. I mean, less of the primal use case a lot of people use it for, but I've definitely been able to help some of my cousins with their businesses and stuff by just sending crypto down to Chile and get the 20% steal from Western Union or whatnot.
Absolutely. And what we found in South Florida is that even in areas we think are very poor, there are a lot of budding entrepreneurs who are moving money around with businesses that have suppliers that are out of the country. And crypto is a great way to do that.
Yeah, no, I love crypto as a settlement tool. I think it's very powerful international settlement tool. One last question for you, Joe, and this is more of a personal one, but what is a life habit or a life lesson that you've really taken to heart that you feel has improved your life?
Wow, it's such a great question. Well, I'll tell you a couple of things I tell my clients in therapy, which works for me too. One is giving gratitude. If you can say thank you to someone or thank someone, or even think about someone who has done you a good turn, you'll be happier. It's kind of like a little bit of a magic bullet. You'll feel a lot of your hostility and anger and anxiety fade away. And I really use that. Another thing later in life is exercise. Same kind of thing. It's kind of a magic bullet. So if you're not doing it and are willing to try it, same effect on anger and anxiety and depression.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with both of those. Try and keep the gratitude strong all the time. It makes for a better.
Yeah, guys, try to keep the gratitude strong all the time, even if you've lost your life savings in FTX. That was Joe Bankman, the father of Sam Bankman-Fried. Joe Bankman is a professor at Stanford Law School, and this is a bloke in Bondi.
Absolute biological necessity. We all fear being insignificant, and so we're looking to attach ourselves to a cause, to something that transcends us, something that's going to outlive us. We want to attach ourselves to something that goes back in time and will outlive us. And by attaching ourselves to something like that, then we can overcome our own fear of insignificance.
Oh, well said. I mean, very, very well said there, 40. Okay, what else is going on?
John Baptist of the villain of the 21st century. It's kind of disturbing in some sense. What do you think? I just don't see DeSantis. I just cannot see it. I mean, let's just be frank. I don't care if he's involved in the military. That doesn't actually make you a badass. The guy is short. He is fat. He is boring as hell. He generates contempt because he's a candidate of the past. Yeah, he's Trump's shadow. Right, and he benefited from Trump, but he also carries the baggage of Trump. I mean, I don't think the reaction against DeSantis will be as intense as the reaction is against Trump, granted. But it will be pretty intense, and it's going to be Martha's Vineyard and, banning gays or whatever. It's going to be intense. They're not going to see him as, look at this pragmatic, down-to-earth leader who saved Florida. That is not going to be the narrative by the media, and that is not going to be the perception. And so it's all of the Trump baggage, but none of the fun, so to speak. I'm just telling you, among most people, you look at Ron DeSantis and you think, I'm better than you are. He's just lame. He is soporific. He is short. He seems whiny.
He's 5'11". He's not that short.
Like whenever he's supposedly like beating people at arguments, he seems like a whiny bitch.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that and all that. I think Ron DeSantis' like kind of role is kind of like a nail polish remover of Trumpism off the nail of the Republican Party. I think it's kind of like, I think ultimately what his purpose is kind of kamikaze himself against, Trump and his candidacy. So to have a new figure that's not tainted by both opposition
Well, who would
and
be
Trump
that figure? Like, Trump came out of nowhere. No, they were setting the groundwork. There was talk in 2010. There was talk in 2012. I think in 2012 he went to CPAC. That was the year where he spoke, by the way, at Geo Crowd. That is the gay conservative organization. Anyway, there are all these weird twists and turns and all this. But he did come out of nowhere. So who could come out of nowhere in a Trumpian way? Who would come out of nowhere as a right-wing populist?
I can't answer that question, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was some kind of a minority.
And Brandon says, now that I'm sober, I use food to get high. Yeah. I mean, if you have an addictive personality, right, you're just going to start transferring your addiction from one thing to another. So the most typical trajectory is you start getting recovery from, say, drug and or alcohol addiction. Once you get recovery there, you need to get recovery in your sex life. That comes next. So you prioritize whichever addiction's most likely to kill you first. So you get recovery in drugs, you get recovery in alcohol, you get recovery in sex, you get recovery in love and relationships, then you get recovery in money, finances, earning, spending, debting. That seems like the most familiar trajectory, which I see again and again.
Oh, yeah. Some kind of like, base X or whatever. There's another very interesting article, also 538, published some time ago. I can send it if you want me to. And actually said, whites more precious views. They polled them in 2016 and had Hillary Clinton and Ben Carson favorability. And they found that precious whites will always find like the base, like Ben Carson more favorable than Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And likewise, it's true. And there's been a lot of discussion and like kind of like critical race theory about this kind of hypothesis. And ultimately, it's like this kind of like edginess where they're still kind of racist, but they're like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna own the lib powers by supporting a black, and now they think they can't be racist. But
yeah, I totally agree with that premise. But who? I mean, I'm not
Kanye West.
Yeah, you're right. You nailed it. Who said that?
Me.
Yeah, I mean that would be so nuts. Also, someone sent this on DMs, but I think Nick Fuentes, who we mentioned a few minutes ago, had the same opinion of the speech that I did, and he said something to the effect like, "I'm out if this is what it's about." He wanted the red meat, just raw Trump steaks thrown out into the audience. But if Kanye tried it in 2020, but that was a hastily assembled write-in candidacy, I believe. Was he on the ballot at all? But he now has time to do that. He has his own personal wealth. He would activate.
Okay, this is from Richard Spence's Twitter space, November 16 of 2022. I haven't caught any Tucker Carlson live in a long time. Maybe you haven't either. Maybe it's time to check out Tucker Carlson. It is noon in Australia. We are going out live over Rumble, over Twitter, over Odyssey, over YouTube, over my Facebook page and my Facebook profile. So we are going out to the entire world right now. They can't shut us down. They can't censor us. We are speaking and sharing and forming a bond, creating a shared reality, doing amazing things together. Here we go, Tucker Carlson.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. On Saturday night, as you may now have read, a 22-year-old man called Anderson Lee Aldrich walked into a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs and opened fire. By the time he was subdued by patrons, he had murdered 5 people and injured another 25. You've seen this story before, but no matter how many times you've seen it, it never stops being horrifying. And it shouldn't stop. Violence and cruelty should always horrify us every single time. When we start to become cynical about the deaths of other human beings, we have lost something essential to our humanity. Unfortunately, you're seeing that. So the most obvious question is, why did Anderson Lee Aldrich shoot 30 people? And the truth is, we don't know. We do know he was clearly a troubled person. Last summer, he threatened to blow up his mother's house with a bomb. Authorities had to evacuate the neighborhood during the 4-hour standoff that ensued. Eventually, he surrendered.
You're seeing this video first on CNN that shows the alleged gunman, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich, surrendering to law enforcement. This is just a year ago, in June of 2021, after allegedly making a bomb threat on his own mother.
So after that happened, he, of course, was arrested and charged with first-degree kidnapping and felony menacing. But then the local district attorney, a man called Michael J. Allen, did not pursue charges. Why? We reached out to Allen's office today to find out why, but he did not get back to us, so we can only guess. We do know what the effect was. Because Aldrich was never charged with a crime and his arrest record was sealed, his violent past did not show up in background checks. Threatening to murder his own mother did not prevent him from buying a firearm, even under Colorado's so-called red flag law, which was designed to prevent that very thing. So those are the facts. That's what we know so far. Once again, authorities failed to keep the public safe. They didn't do their job. You may recognize now a pattern, because you have seen that before. As for Aldrich's motive in shooting strangers, we can only guess. And we're not going to guess, both because guessing would be dishonest and irresponsible. You can't just make up a story because it suits your pre-existing beliefs. But more to the point, we're not going to guess because it would dishonor the memories of the 5 people who were just murdered in Colorado Springs. These were human beings. They were Americans. They were not props in a larger ideological war. And to reduce them to that is wrong. That's exactly what many politicians are doing right now. Within hours of the shootings, Joe Biden and his allies used this tragedy as a pretext for disarming the law-abiding population of the country. We need more gun control, Joe Biden said predictably, notwithstanding the fact that Colorado's existing gun control laws, which are extensive, did not prevent this attack. So it was a contemptible and heartless and deeply cynical display of political opportunism. But it didn't stop with gun control, because in fact, the Second Amendment is not the freedom that threatens the people in charge the most. No, that would be the First Amendment, which is your right to say what you sincerely believe. That is the right, the first in our Bill of Rights, that terrifies them the most. Your words are a greater threat than any firearm. They must censor you, or else they lose power. It is that simple. So these horrifying murders in Colorado over the weekend quickly became a pretext for yet more censorship of your speech. You are responsible for this, they told you, because you said the wrong things. You are guilty of stochastic terrorism, inspiring violence by your beliefs. Anderson Lee Aldrich committed mass murder because you complained about the sexualizing of children. Every time you object to drag time story hour for 5th graders, or point out that genital mutilation is being committed on minors, which it is, every time you say that, you are putting people's lives at risk. Now that seems implausible, and yet many are making this claim. Many have made it over the past 24 hours. Watch, for example, Brandy Zadrozny of NBC.
Online, including this Libs of TikTok account, which feeds larger media like Fox News stories. What has happened is a demonization of LGBTQ people, calling them groomers and pedophiles. This type of thing, whether we can say it's motive or not, what we know is that it's just another reason why LGBTQ people are scared.
So there it is, right there. When you point out the truth, indisputably, and the truth is that some adults in this country, apparently a growing number, have a deeply unhealthy fixation on the sexuality of children, when you say that out loud, you get people killed. That is what Brandy Zadrozny is saying. And by saying that, Brandy Zadrozny and the many people like her are effectively defending that same deeply unhealthy fixation on the sexuality of children. By the way, it's absolutely real. You're not imagining that. It's happening. The evidence is everywhere, and it comes to light on the internet. And Brandy Zadrozny and people like her hate that you're seeing that. Notice that Zadrozny is not claiming that Libs of TikTok is making this up. She never even suggests that. She is threatening them, and what she's doing is threatening them, you should know. And she's doing that because they're pointing it out. Noticing it's happening is their crime. And once again, it is happening. Children's Hospital in Boston, one of the most famous hospitals in the world, has admitted performing double mastectomies on children for no medical reason at all. There is no scientific justification for sexually mutilating kids. They are not doing it for a scientifically defensible reason. They are doing it because they believe in a very specific religious ideology. That's true. Is pointing that out an attack on gay people? Of course it is not an attack on gay people. It has nothing to do with gay people. It has to do with sexually mutilating children, which is wrong, period. It should be a crime, period. And yet suddenly it's very common. As we've reported on this show, UCSF, University of California, San Francisco Hospital, one of the leading hospitals in the world, is doing this as well. And they've said so out loud. This is an actual quote from their website. Quote, Genital surgery is being performed on a case-by-case basis more frequently in minors. In the absence of solid evidence, providers often must rely on the expert opinions of innovators and thought leaders in the field. So your child gets sexually mutilated genital surgery that is irreversible, not on the basis of science, but on the basis of innovators and thought leaders. It's hard to believe that's happening. That quote was scrubbed, by the way, after we reported on it, not because it wasn't a real quote, but because it was a real quote. It was too incriminating. Once again, this is everywhere. A parent in Pennsylvania called Megan Brock decided to do some actual reporting on it because actual reporters choose not to. They look away and attack anyone who wants to know what's actually happening. So she filed a records request.
Oh man, my pirate stream of Fox News has gone down. Here, let's listen to a little Richard Spencer and Company from November 16th.
He would be Trumpian in the sense that the media would just have to cover him. They would they would cut away from a Trump speech and cover an empty podium of Kanye. No doubt. I think that's
Secretary
someone just kind of
Rachel Levine,
she
wrote
Kyrie Irving from Hebrews to presidents or something like that.
More than 10 patients who have had chest surgery under 18, as young as 15, and bottom surgery, 17. That's the sexual mutilation of children for no medical or scientific reason, simply because right now it is fashionable and consistent with a cult that has taken over a lot of the leadership of this country. But the fact remains, children are being destroyed by this. It should be a crime. The people who commit it should be in jail. But it's not just the sexual mutilation of children in hospitals. This is part of a larger trend, and the trend is this: adults crossing the line, and it has always been a bright line, into deep involvement with the sexuality of children. That has always been, and must in a civilized society always be, the most forbidden thing. It's considered unacceptable even among prison inmates. But now it seems to be growing in its prevalence. Consider the latest ad for the clothing brand Balenciaga. This was just uploaded on Instagram. As you can see, the photo shoot they're using to sell their products features a young girl holding a teddy bear in a bondage outfit. Then, in case you missed the point, the photo shoot also contains this image. It shows several documents. Most of them aren't visible, but what you can see when you zoom in, and of course the point is that you see it, is a reference to a U.S. Supreme Court case called Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition. That case struck down a law against kiddie porn. What is this? Well, it is what it appears to be. It's an endorsement of kiddie porn, of child pornography. What else could it be? We wanted to know. So we reached out today to Balenciaga to get their explanation, and they didn't respond. So we're going to have to take that on face value and ask, where's the moral outrage? We have an entire industry in this country comprised of moral outrage merchants. If you've ever been on Twitter, you know what we mean. Truly, an entire sector of our economy is devoted to attacking people for falling short of the mark. And here is a high-end retailer promoting kiddie porn in an ad on Instagram, and nobody notices. There's no boycott. There's no front-page New York Times editorial against it. And of course, Instagram let the advertisement run, endorsing kiddie porn. And by the way, if you have an alternate explanation for what this was, let us know. A child with a teddy bear in a bondage outfit and a Supreme Court decision striking down a kiddie porn law displayed on the table? What is that? Are we jumping to conclusions? Don't think so. It is what it appears to be. It's right in your face and no one's saying anything. Again, Instagram had no problem with this. Until Elon Musk took over Twitter, Twitter allowed hashtags that explicitly linked to child pornography. Nobody said anything because crimes against children are no big deal. It's thought crimes that are the real crimes. So if you said something about it, if you were libs of TikTok and said, wait a second, this seems to be abetting child molestation, which of course, that's what it's doing, you were instantly booted off Twitter. But the links to kiddie porn, they're still there. Well, now they've been deleted. Thank God. That's one improvement. So all of this has been happening out in the open, but NBC News hasn't bothered to report on any of it. Where is their report tonight on Balenciaga pushing kiddie porn in an Instagram ad? No. They're reserving all their energy to attack you for noticing. You're a stochastic terrorist if you point it out. And you need to be censored. Watch.
Content moderation is a hard task. What we know is that Twitter and where the bulk of this information is right now, because that's where the biggest accounts like Matt Walsh and Libs of TikTok, again, where they sort of post this stuff. What's being done? Well, 2 days ago, we know that Elon Musk, who owns Twitter now, he just reversed the policy that Twitter did have against targeting and harassment of LGBTQ people, against misgendering transgender people.
So here you have people mutilating the genitals of children, running ads on Instagram promoting kiddie porn, and there's Brandy Zadrozny on NBC News. She's not attacking them. She's attacking anyone who notices and accusing them of attacking gay people. Once again, this has nothing to do with gay people. This is an attack on the sexual fixation on and mutilation of the genitals of children, pushing kiddie porn. There's nothing to do with gay people. That's an offense against anyone's definition of decency, and she's effectively defending it, and they all are. You're not allowed to notice it, or else you're committing violence. You're complicit in mass murder. Well, the people who are doing these things are fine. No one attacks them. An ACLU spokesman launched this attack on Doug Lamborn, a congressman from Colorado. Watch this. He voted against the Respect for Marriage Act and is a co-sponsor of Marjorie Taylor Greene's nationwide ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth. Huh? That's the crime? Children having their genitals mutilated on the basis of no science, no actual real medical guidance, no longitudinal study? There's no evidence this is a good idea, but GLAAD is for it, so doctors mindlessly do it, and you can't complain or else you're a murderer? Too crazy. These are our children. Can't put up with it. For her part, GLAAD's president declared that because of Saturday's shooting, you need to shut up while doctors mutilate children.
In terms of trans kids and gender-affirming care, the American Medical Association, the Pediatric Association has confirmed that these are safe procedures. This is finished business. It's politicians and junk science who's creating some kind of debate or argument about this.
Really? Now, we realize she's paid to say that. Of course, all these activists are paid to say what they say. Very specifically paid. The ACLU is paid to say what they say. They all are. ADL's paid to say what it says. GLAAD is paid to say what it says. But the truth is, the no BS scientific truth is, there's no evidence it's safe. Where's the 10-year study on that? Do you have one? Oh, you don't have one. We have no idea what the long-term effects of puberty blockers are. We have no idea. We can't even guess as to the long-term psychological effects of genital mutilation on a 17-year-old or 15-year-old. What? You have no idea it's safe. You're lying. It's not a safe procedure. We've spoken to a lot of victims of this barbarism, and it is barbarism. We did a whole documentary on it, and by the end of the documentary, we were more shocked than when we started reporting it out. Even people who support these procedures can't actually defend them, and that's the whole point. They have to make you shut up because they don't have any facts on their side. If you're not okay with child abuse, you're a murderer. And it's worked on a lot of weak-minded journalists who only care about status and acceptance by the group. But there are a few on whom it has not worked. At the top of that list is Chris Rufo. He joins us now. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. I don't understand how Balenciaga, whatever they sell, can put an ad on Instagram today promoting kiddie porn and no one says anything.
Well, we're going to find out exactly what's going to happen to them. Certainly people are contacting them. They're in a lot of hot water. But the broader trend here is that what we're seeing is the emergence of a decentralized censorship regime. 100 years ago, governments in Europe and the United States would have to censor content from the top down, but they could be easily identified as the ones doing the censoring. Today, we have this consortium of left-wing activist journalists, left-wing NGOs and nonprofits, and then friendly administration officials in the FBI and the DOJ that work together behind the scenes to enforce public debate, to deplatform journalists who are actually doing the reporting on these issues, and then even calling for the prosecution and imprisonment of political opposition using the FBI. We've seen that on critical race theory. We've seen that on radical gender theory. And the brilliance of this system, if we're going to give them some credit, is that it's almost operating invisibly. So what we have to do is we have to bring it to the surface, just as you've done, make it visible, put a name on it, and stop it, because this is the greatest threat to the First Amendment in the last 50 years.
And I just find it remarkable, the passive aggression that is always at work with these people. You pointed out, and they're the victims. I'm sure Brandy Zadrozny will be on Twitter right now saying that you're threatening her life by sitting across from someone who mentioned her name. They are never held to account for what they are promoting, which is the sexualization of children. Like, let's stop lying about it. It's right in our faces.
That's right. And in that specific example, Brandy Zadrozny works for one of the largest and most powerful media corporations in the world. She has an affiliation with elite universities. This is someone who is in a position of power, who has actually made her career doxing and targeting random online citizens, Trump supporters, etc. She wrote a very sympathetic profile of an actual pedophile, a sex offender, a number of years ago. These are people that pretend to be the powerless, holding the powerful accountable, when in fact they're actually the powerful bullying the powerless, bullying independent journalists, and bullying people who stand in the way of the left-wing apparatus that wants to push this ideology on all Americans.
Oh, they'd hurt you if they could. Trust me. Chris Rufo. Thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. So outside, say, the IRS and the FBI, the last organization you want to get a text from is probably the New York Times, because it's not going to be good news. They're out to hurt you. Let's stop lying. But unlike Dave Portnoy, you probably didn't save the text. Dave Portnoy saved the text that he got from the New York Times when they tried to hurt him. Oh, he caught them lying. He joins us in just a moment.
Okay, so Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition. I actually know something about this. I actually know something about the Free Speech Coalition. They are the porn industry's trade group. So one of the talking points that people in the porn industry use to make the argument that what they're doing is okay is that it is legal. And they say we don't traffic in kiddie porn. Well, they did traffic in kiddie porn for as long as they could get away with it. You used to be able to go into pawn shops prior to 1977 and buy kiddie porn. So as long as they could get away with it, the pornography industry trafficked in kiddie porn. Then in 1977, the US Congress passed strict laws against child pornography, and that is when the industry stopped trafficking in kiddie porn. So Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition. This is a US Supreme Court case which struck down two provisions of the Child Pornography Prevention Act of 1996 because they said these provisions abridge the freedom to engage in a substantial amount of lawful speech, right? So simulated child pornography is protected free speech, all right? The US Supreme Court established that simulated child pornography is protected free speech, so they overrode what Congress passed, and they have this court case, all right, that's brought against the government, against the Attorney General of the time, John Ashcroft, by Free Speech Coalition, the porn industry trade group, and Bold Type, a publisher of a book advocating the nudist lifestyle, some dude who paints nudes, and Ron Raffaelli, photographer who specializes in erotic images. So the Supreme Court rejected an invitation to increase the amount of child porn speech that could be categorically outside the protection of the First Amendment. Hey, you're probably wondering what the hell's going on with Richard Spencer and company.
The whole anti-Semitism stuff.
Well, I know.
Or being just a politician in general, to be honest.
But you could kind of say that about 2016 Trump.
True.
I mean, I don't think you can't underestimate the degree to which Trump was just treated as just anathema by the party. You know, I mean, they hated him. He granted would say things like, you know, we love Israel, blah, blah, blah. But he was kind of, in the America First stuff, there were these echoes of the old America First movement. There's a kind of sense of, you know, a kind of vague anti-Semitism and isolationism. Pro-Russia as well, really went against the party. So, and now he flipped them. He totally converted. I mean, it coincided with the era, but he converted them to be Russia fanatics. So, I mean, things can change. And, you know, I think the Kanye thing is like just wild enough to work. The other thing I've noticed about like predicting history is that.
Oh, by the way, regarding the news, remember when major news story for weeks was, will NATO establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, right? You had all these politicians agitating for this. You had all these media pundits agitating for this. Now it's completely dropped off the radar. Russian planes don't fly over Ukraine because Ukraine has such excellent technology for bringing down airplanes that Ukraine on its own solved this problem, right? Ukraine is not bothered by Russian aircraft because Ukrainians have the technology to shoot those aircraft down. So this major news story, will the United States establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, right, has just been obviated by facts on the ground. So much of what's in the news is not very important. It's just a distraction from reality.
There's always a narrative that gets going, and then you just throw that out the window. Basically, something else is going to happen. It's kind of like it's rare that like in the NFL, like the team that everyone has favorited, like, oh, this is their year, they're going to do it.
Is Kanye and Milo, is that true? Yes. Right. Milo always glomming on to the next big thing. I mean, Milo acted as an intern for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Milo is now a trad Catholic. Milo's always, finding some new, right-wing populist cause to glom onto.
It kind of never works out that way. There's just something, I don't know, it's just like a law of the universe. And everyone now, if you ask them, if you poll them, it's, oh, Trump's over, it's DeSantis, and Biden is too old to run twice or something like that. None of that's going to be correct. It's going to be something that's unpredictable that actually happens and then seems inevitable in retrospect. I mean, you even see that with people like, I, as you know, Alberto, you can vouch because I know you were at that when I talked about it. So like 3 months ago, I was basically saying, I think I want to buck the consensus and like make a call for a Democratic victory. And then I questioned my own instincts. So that's that recording is up on the Substack. But I kind of questioned my own instincts. And I was like, God damn it, I'm looking at these polls. I just can't like go against math. Well, it's ultimately not math. Ultimately, people go out and vote. And so I kind of should have stuck with my instincts. But anyway, what you see from pundits now is that they're like, well, no one really thought there was going to be a red wave. Like it's like, no, you were all convinced of it. The New York Times was convinced of a red wave a week before the election. So it's always something else. And so everyone's kind of.
Okay, let's go back to Tucker Carlson.
He's not especially political. He's not a right-winger or anything, but he's an American, so he believes in free speech. And because he believes in free speech and exercises it, other media organizations have been trying to destroy him. So he got the dreaded text from the New York Times. Can we talk to you? The story that resulted was written by a reporter called Emily Steele. And in that piece, Emily Steele writes this, quote, "The Times provided Mr. Portnoy with detailed questions about this article. Barstool executives did not respond to repeated messages. Mr. Portnoy did not provide answers." So you probably didn't think about that if you read it in the New York Times, but it turns out it's not true. They lied, and unlike most people who've been attacked by the New York Times, Dave Portnoy can prove it. He just posted this exchange he had by text with Emily Steele. Quote, "Hi, Emily. I know you're currently trying to dig up dirt on me as a bunch of women I barely know have sent me your interactions. I'm an open book. I'd love to sit down and have an on-the-record conversation with you just to clarify. I get to record it and use the footage as well." So here's how Emily Steele, the Times reporter, responded, quote, "We're happy to meet in New York or talk over the phone today or tomorrow. We can record audio, but not video. We do not accept those terms. If you would like to provide feedback in response to my email, I'm eager to hear it." So it turns out Dave Portnoy did respond and offered to talk to them. He just wanted to videotape it because what would be wrong with that? When you're hiding something, you don't want that, and they are hiding a lot of things. They lied about that exchange, and Portnoy, unlike most people, can prove it. He joins us tonight. Dave Portnoy, thanks for coming on. So you grew up in Boston. I think you probably grew up in a family that took the New York Times seriously. You've lived in New York. You may live there now. Were you surprised by this?
No, at this point, I wasn't. But what you just said, I talked to my dad, who is somebody who, what I say, trusts the New York Times.
Yeah.
And that's the alarming part. Because, in the way you just prefaced it, I reached out to her 7 months ago. Tucker, they've been doing this for nearly a year. I knew about this investigation. When I heard about it, I said, let's sit down, open book. I will answer any question you have. And the thing about it, and I don't care what your politics are, how you sit, I am the witness of a story you are working on for basically a year, and I am saying I will sit down with you. You can ask me anything. I'm not saying lawyers in the room, nobody, just me. I will answer every single question you have. She had no interest in that. She said, I'm eager to do it. 2 weeks went by. I didn't hear. I reached out again. I said, hey, I'm still here. So she did this. She worked on it for nearly a year, and then she went ghost, crickets. I didn't hear anything for 7 months, and I get the text, the list of questions that says, hey, we want all these answers to all these allegations in 48 hours. It would be the equivalent, if this is a court case, because that's what the Times is doing, try to create a case that I'm a scumbag and sway people, that you give one lawyer basically a year to present the entire case why this guy stinks. And you have 30 seconds now to defend yourself. Who would ever do that? Nobody in their right mind. She never had interest in telling the truth. All she wanted to do was build a case against me. She never talked to any of my friends, anybody who would advocate. She never wanted to hear how we do responsible gaming training at our company. It was all a hit piece, and she had no interest in hearing my side of the story.
What's so funny is it's about your personal life, and you've got a pretty effervescent personal life, but I've been in the media for 31 years. You hardly have the creepiest personal life of any in the media. I mean, it comes to the media. These are creepy people. Why are they trying to attack you on this? Because you're disobedient, right?
Yeah, I think I've become politicized a little bit, but like what you said, listen, I don't care if people don't like me, Tucker. I really don't.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is give people the full picture. Well, I'm disillusioned. I know that's not what the Times does, but how can you say this woman has a Pulitzer? They should take that back, break it, and throw it in the river. Like, all I'm saying is let people decide. How can you do such a one-sided hit piece and then say you're the New York Times and you actually...
Okay, let's get back to this Richard Spencer discussion.
Kind of fixated on this, and it might be something else. It might be something really different. And I think the Kanye suggestion, it's just crazy enough. It's just crazy enough to actually work.
He was in the Oval Office. So experience.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And White Lives Matter, I mean, it's kind of like he's taking a meme from the 2016 alt-right, which was a Trump era, artifact, and he
got more than 12 million votes,
he wore that
and the yes side won. So immediately, as promised, Elon Musk reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account. CBS News was highly upset. They're for democracy, but not if it means presidential candidates getting to talk in public. So they got off Twitter, saying their security was in danger. And then on Face the Nation, which apparently is still a show, they interviewed a completely discredited NYU professor who claimed, buckle your seatbelt now, that the Russians must have hacked the Twitter poll.
So I think these polls are mostly a gimmick, and I would argue the people haven't spoken. The GRU has spoken. Twitter
Russian
has become,
intelligence, you mean?
100%. Twitter has become a playground for bad actors and fake bots. This poll is meaningless. This decision is meaningless.
How can that guy teach it to college? What a crackpot. Like the Russians aren't busy enough. They're in the middle of a war, but they've got time to hack a Twitter poll? By the way, maybe they are. He has no evidence whatsoever. Like none. Just kind of throws it out there, makes it up. Major claim against a government. Anchor just rolls with it. At MSNBC, a guest offered this measured take on the whole situation. Watch.
I'm absolutely disgusted, but what else do we expect from very white, privileged, cis, hetero men protecting each other because we always mistake wealth and inheritance for genius. So yay, Elon Musk gets what he wants, his buddy back on the air, in order to finish burning down democracy while he finishes burning down the town square.
Attacking white people again. Why is that allowed, by the way? Why can't you just turn on MSNBC? White people this! Is that okay? Is everyone all right with that? You can just single out a racial group and attack them because of their skin color? I thought that was wrong. Didn't we have a whole civil rights movement about that? Apparently not. Vince Colonnese is a big-time radio host in D.C. and a very wise person. He joins us tonight. So you're for democracy, Vince. Does that mean that presidential candidates get to talk in public or no?
But, for all the screeching the left does to us about democracy, it's amazing how much they go completely catatonic if an opposing viewpoint breaks through to a big audience. They hate nothing more than that. If somebody's opposing viewpoint, so Kanye West says that he's against abortion, they go crazy. If Donald Trump might have an opportunity to tweet again, he hasn't even tweeted yet, by the way. If he might have an opportunity to do that, they go absolutely Looney Tunes. And the reason for that is that their ideas are so thin and indefensible that they realize that they don't want to engage in a debate on any of this. If you've been wondering why has the left gotten so crazy, it's because they've created this airtight echo chamber where no opposing viewpoints ever break their way in. Otherwise, these ideas would be battle tested, and that's how you end up with, we've got to mutilate children. Joe Biden can control the weather if we only give him more power. The Russians stole the 2016 election, tried to do it in 2020, and just voted in Elon Musk's Twitter poll. This is all left-wing delusions that are fed by their intellectual flabbiness created by this environment where no opposing viewpoints are allowed to break through.
That's such a wise point. And maybe I'm too literal, I know that I am, but how can you, in the same sentence, use the word democracy and then go on to say that a political candidate can't speak? How can you have a democracy with no free speech? That can't happen. By definition, you can't have that. Correct? Or am I missing something?
These are all authoritarian impulses. Because look at what happened just a few weeks ago. You had Joe Biden step up to a microphone. He was asked, hey, what about Twitter? Are you going to assess, are you going to investigate them? And he's like, we should probably do that. The federal government should look into the foreign business dealings of Twitter. What? The guy who is credibly accused of being bought off by Ukrainian and Communist Party of China interests is standing up there lecturing us about how we have to investigate whether or not Elon Musk is bought and paid for. The guy is allowing conversation, not foreclosing it.
Yeah.
So I hear that Twitter is breaking down, that Twitter's on its last legs, but Twitter, as far as I'm aware, has never been better in the last 6 years. Steve Saylor's getting a ton of new followers. I see a lot of good things.
We've done to the climate. You remember the water fountains, carbon on one side, climate on the other. Well, he's going to make good on that. Reparations for the climate. But guess who's paying reparations? Not everybody. Not everybody. We'll tell you.
Okay, thank you, Tucker Carlson. What's your experience of Twitter like? To me, it's gotten better. I love people getting back on. Donald Trump having his account reinstated.
Fashion show. I mean, he just,
He did also make a gospel album, which I guess that's something a lot of Christians would like.
He was going to get the religious right vote.
Talking about Kanye West.
You imagine them,
Spencer.
being fanatic for Trump, and like Paula White doing this, like hookah haku, they're coming from South America. Hookah haku, they're coming from Africa. Hookah hookah. I'm paraphrasing, but that's actually an accurate quote. Think of how nuts they would go over Kanye.
Yeah, I certainly don't imagine
forming
them voting. I don't imagine them voting for Kanye over Trump. But if it was like Kanye versus DeSantis, I can imagine Kanye sweeping that thing.
I could kind of imagine. I like this.
Yeah.
Whoever suggested this is.
Yeah.
You did, I think. You kind of, because I was asking, I was like, who is it? Who's that dark horse? And lo and behold, it's Kanye. Yeah. Yay. Yay. Excuse me. A name on the president. Wow, that just makes too much sense.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's this prevailing narrative, like I said before, in CRT, which I tend to follow, that this is we're kind of like in age of like the racist non-whites, of like multiracial whiteness, where like you have these like non-whites who are kind of like proxies for like quote unquote white interests, who like kind of like personify the racism and bigotries of the white population, who they can now like support, now having like the plausible deniability of not being racist because this person's not white.
God, this guy's got a horrible voice.
Yes.
So
that's crazy enough to make sense.
As an aside, I think that'll become funny. I think the conservative movement, and you're kind of seeing this in Britain too with the this new Indian prime minister. These like base X's are trying to be very pragmatic, very like non-ideological, so they tend to wiggle their way up to the hierarchy very well. I think eventually in 10 years, like most conservative organizations will be ran by non-whites, essentially grifting the stupid white population. But
yeah, I think that's probably accurate, and I do think that like the GOP is going to fundamentally change the conservative movement. It's going to be affected by this. I mean, I just mentioned that before. In 2012, Romney said, Russia is our greatest strategic adversary or something like that. And actually, Barack Obama was more down to earth and kind of reasonable about that and said, well, we need to get over the Cold War, grandpa, basically. And you fast forward a decade, and there's more Russian sympathetic sentiment, not just kind of anti-war sentiment, something Russia sympathetic sentiment in the GOP. So they actually can go off the reservation. They can really transform. And so I think the Kanye stuff, it's that kind of crazy racism that's kind of plausibly deniable. I'm not, how can I be racist? I'm black, but also how can I be anti-Semitic? I'm in fact a Jew.
It's just making Kanye his running mate would unironically boost his campaign and give him that juice that he had in 2016.
No question.
Mm-hmm. And then, Kanye from there,
yes,
becomes
just
president.
For the record, I'm out. Like I'm not on board, basically. But just if anyone thinks that's what I'm leading to. But yeah, I just think, wow, this is really an interesting prognostication. They're going to have to tap in to that. I mean, it fits with my general thesis, which is that you need to tap into the id. You need to tap. You need to like. Clarice Starling has to go visit Hannibal Lecter in order to solve the case. Like you need to go there. And how are they going to do that? Maybe Trump can't do it on his own anymore.
Yeah, you need to kind of look them in the eyes and kind of see where the wind is blowing.
Yes. All right, let some other people speak. Wackaloid.
Hello, Richard?
Yes, hi.
Hey, I was thinking, what is your, if you don't mind me asking, what is your personal plan to deal with the so-called browning of America? Is it just use wealth to insulate yourself, live in kind of white areas, or is that still even an issue that that you concern yourself with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm just really not interested in this kind of stuff anymore.
He's not interested in the browning of America. It was like a major concern of his. He became famous for his concern about this, but just not interested in this kind of stuff anymore.
Okay. I'm sorry. I've been out of the loop for a while, so I'm not exactly sure where you stand on this stuff.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But also,
Aaron?
Yes. So kind of to build off his point, I was curious what you learned from the Pat Buchanan interviews that you gave a while back, and maybe the Bowden ones might overlap a little.
Well, I don't think those overlap too much. Yeah, I mean, what did I learn from them? I probably learned more by reading Pat's book than speaking with him. I mean, he's a very gracious guy and a very intelligent guy. I think Pat was almost, to go back to even some of these comments that Fuentes made or something, I almost think Pat is too much of an intellectual to be a populist. Pat is a very intelligent man. Pat does, I think his he came in with the Nixon administration in his 20s. I mean, he kind of leans in that direction. And I don't think Pat ever tapped into the crazy. Pat would make really reasonable arguments about trade and immigration and culture, and he would get a bit edgy. But the 1992 RNC convention speech, they took back Los Angeles block by block, and that's how we'll take back America. I mean, okay, it's passionate, it's a bit edgy, but it doesn't tap into the total lunacy that Trump was able to tap into with the alt-right, with QAnon, with Stop the Steal, with all of it. He just never was able to do that. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my takeaway. But I think Pat is probably most interesting writing about history and kind of making it come alive, or even writing about his own career. Okay, Lloyd George knew my father. Wow. You are up.
Oh, to sort of go off what you said about Pat Buchanan, I think the big difference between Buchanan and why Trump succeeded where he didn't was that Trump was able to appeal to the sort of socially moderate voters who might have agreed with Buchanan on immigration and trade, but not so much on the culture war stuff. But obviously, with abortion being more of an issue now, and Trump leaning more into the crazy populist, right? I think that's sort of radical centrism, or what some people call middle American radicalism. That's the base of support for Trump is somewhat diminished, and I think that's sort of the main tension in what you might.
That's 2016. I mean, yeah, I do think that there was in the RNC and going into the election, there was a kind of Sam Francis quality to Donald Trump. I mean, in his book, "The America We Deserve," I believe is the title of it. I mean, he came out in favor of national health care. There was an interesting moment where I think Ivanka mentioned extending family leave for women and so on. I mean, there was some very interesting kind of pragmatic talk. At the RNC, I don't think he mentioned abortion, although maybe he did, but it was in passing and it wasn't really salient. At least what I saw, I watched 30 to 45 minutes of the Trump speech. I don't think he mentioned abortion at all. And yet that's his ultimate legacy. I mean, the thing about Trumpism that is lasting is the end of Roe v. Wade. Nothing else is. So if he's now running as like a sleepy version of what he was doing in 2016, I mean, again, I don't really think that can win. As I've been saying, I think he needs to dial up the crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think you make an interesting point, but I do think that like the middle America,
Richard wants Donald Trump to dial up the crazy. He says that's the only way that Republicans can win, by dialing up the crazy. I just think Richard's past in theatrical productions, directing theater, maybe getting the best of his political analysis here. Republicans win by making crime, disorder, contagion, filth, woke hysteria, nonsense, the transsexual hysteria, making these prominent issues. I think that's a very solid, non-crazy basis for running and winning elections.
Reasonable middle American radical is kind of a dying breed. Whites in the suburbs and whites who live in urban areas are going to the Democratic Party. It's a slow but sure transition. The multiracial working class coalition that Trump wants to create, and that did create, they want, you dial the crazy up to 11, man. That's what they want. That's how you motivate them. That's how you win.
If I may interject.
Sure, go ahead. Gay partisan.
Yeah.
just want to say, first of all, like, hi, Richard. And seriously, like, the whole talk about immigration, it's just upsets me because I came to the United States as a refugee from Saudi Arabia. And I had to represent myself. And so, to anyone who out there who thinks that America has open borders, yeah, you're wrong.
Okay, I think that will do it. I'm about ready to go on another walkabout. Talk to you.